Joe Cribb. I'm curator of Central Asian coins at the British Museum, and I'm going to tell you about some of our treasures from Uzbekistan that we have in the collection. We've had a very long-standing connection with Uzbekistan and other parts of Central Asia, partly through our collections, but also through our friendship with scholars from Uzbekistan. Just recently we had a young student here, Firuza Ayupova, who was studying our ancient coins from Central Asia. And we've had several visits from her professor in the Institute of Arts in Tashkent, Edvard Bretfaladze, who has become a great friend, and he's recently published this book on Uzbek coins, and we share many interests with him and exchange scholarship with him. We both have a very keen interest in the ancient period, that Professor Bretfaladze is also a world-renowned specialist in Timurid coins as well. The first coins that I'd like to show you are from the ancient period, and beginning with Alexander the Great, the first Westerner to reach Uzbekistan, unfortunately along with an army, as so many other Westerners have arrived. But he brought into the area the whole idea of using coins, and from his time onwards, Uzbekistan has had a rich numismatic heritage, right down to the present day. The last issue of Sum coins has already reached our collection, and we have examples here. Alexander the Great is one of the most well-known individuals of world history, and he's depicted here on a coin from ancient Turkey. The coins that he and his army would have brought into Uzbekistan would be his own issues, which we have thousands of in the collection. The examples here were issued in ancient Iraq, but this is the sort of coin that he would have carried with him. They're silver pieces with the head of a god, Heracles on the front, and the seated figure of another god on the back, Zeus. Once coinage had come into the area of Uzbekistan, it didn't go away. The next independent rulers in the area are the Greek kings of Bactria, and from this part of our collection we have many examples of a ruler called Euthydemus. Euthydemus's coins were traded by the Greeks into Sogdiana, ancient Uzbekistan, and they all have his portrait on the front and again a god on the back. Kings of Bactria, ruling on the river Amudarya, issued silver coins like the coins of Alexander the Great, but with their portraits on the front and normally with a Greek god on the back. This is Heracles on a coin of the king Euthydemus. Now, the remarkable thing is that the first coins from ancient Bukhara are almost identical to these coins of Euthydemus. Here we have a coin issued by the local Sogdian king. It has exactly the same portrait on the front as the Greek coin, and on the back it has the same Greek god, but instead of a Greek inscription it has an inscription written in Sogdian saying that it's issued by a local king. This coin was collected and brought to Britain by an British Indian Army officer called Sir Alexander Cunningham. He was a very keen archaeologist and was in fact eventually employed by the Indian government as its chief archaeologist, and he was a great coin collector. And we have his collection. We also have the collection of the India Office, which was the British agency for ruling India, and most of our ancient Central Asian coins come from that collection. But in this tray we also have some coins brought to Britain by one of the first British people to visit Uzbekistan. This coin, another example of the local Sogdian coins, was brought by Lieutenant Alexander Byrne, who visited Bukhara in the 1830s. And in his record of his travels, he said that near Bukhara he acquired some Greek-looking coins. And this and several other pieces in this tray are examples of the coins that he brought back from Bukhara. The B on the ticket is B for Burns, according to his name. Front of Professor Rhett Velard's book on ancient and Islamic coins from Uzbekistan is a coin of the early Islamic period, and in the British Museum we have very similar examples. Although they're Islamic, they have a picture of a head on the front and a horseman on the back. And the early Islamic rulers of Khwarezm were issuing coins like this, imitating earlier coins from the same area. So this is a pre-Islamic coin from Khwarezm. And the earliest coin that we have in our collection from that area is this fine piece, which has the head of the king on the front, wearing a typical nomad cloth cap, being crowned by... This coin has the picture of the king on the front wearing a typical nomad cloth cap, and on the back the same ruler on horseback. This coin, we think, was probably issued in the 3rd century of the Common Era, but the design is copied, in fact, from one of the coins of the ancient Greek kings who ruled on the Amudarya. The front of the coin, although the type of portrait has changed, is still a portrait with the same sort of border on it, and the horseman on the front, on the back of the Khwarezmian coin, replacing 2 horsemen on the Greek coin. But the inscription around the horseman is exactly copied from the Greek coin. The person who made the coin didn't understand what it said, he just copied it to make it look like a coin. But we know that this is a Khwarezmian coin from about 400 years after this coin was issued. Okay. From ancient Khwarezmia, we only have a very small selection of coins because it's so far from India and Pakistan, where most of our coins were collected. And from the ancient city of Chach, for example, we just have 1 coin, although there are thousands in the collections in Uzbekistan. So when Professor Rhett Velarda came here, we asked him in great detail about the coins of ancient Chach, because we'd not seen them, and he provided us with several publications to give us knowledge of them. After the period of Greek were great coin issuers, and in our collection here we have over 100 pieces from the 1st century BC through till the Islamic period, covering all the major sites in ancient Sogdia. The coins that I have in the first tray are, although they're probably issued long after Alexander, actually copy the coins of Alexander. They have the same head of a god on one side and seated deity on the other side. And these are found in the Kashkadaria valley region, and are only found in that area. Initially they look very much like Alexander's coins. Gradually they become smaller and smaller until the design has become very stylized and very small, but still one can recognize that they're copying coins close to us. The local Sogdian rulers copied another Greek coin. These are copied from Seleucid coins issued in Iraq, and they copy the coins of the Seleucid king Antiochus I, having a head on one side and a horse's head on the other side. The horse's head becomes very stylized, but hand area in the 1st century AD, coins with the head of a local ruler and an inscription in Sogdian were issued. On the back they have a typical nomad figure wearing nomad dress and carrying a bow, the typical nomad weapon. For the next few hundred years, similar coins were being issued in the area. From Bukhara, in the 4th century AD, coins were issued which copied Iranian coins. They have the head of an Iranian king on the front and a rather crude representation of a Zoroastrian fire altar. The Sogdians at this time were Zoroastrians, and so it's not unexpected that they should use such designs. But when Islam arrived in the area, the same design carried on being used with Islamic inscriptions added until proper Islamic coins were introduced by the Abbasid caliphs. Important collections of Islamic coins, and we have many coins from the Uzbekistan region, which partly have come into the collection through other collections, through old collectors, but some of them were actually dug up in Britain. So, for example, this broken coin here was minted in Samarkand in the 3rd century of Islam, so in the 9th century, and was brought by traders into Russia, and then from Russia the Vikings of Norway brought it through the Baltic, across the North Sea to Britain, and it was then buried in this country. And in our trays we have quite a large number of coins from Uzbekistan that have reached this collection in that way. Local rulers broke away from the control of the Islamic Caliphate in Baghdad and started to issue their own coins in Central Asia. And from Samarkand we have one of the earliest coins of the Tahirids who ruled in Central Asia in the period after the Abbasids. Like some of the Abbasid coins, this coin was also found in Britain, brought here by the Vikings. And also this Samanid coin, fragment of a Samanid coin, came in the same way. Like both the Tahirids and the Samanids had mints at Samarkand, and here and here and here are Samarkand coins. Full of the rulers of Central Asia in the medieval period were the Khwarezm Shahs, ruling from a base in Khwarezmia, and issuing many gold coins at mints throughout the region. Here we have some pieces from Bukhara with the typical Islamic design, and from Samarkand, curious copper pieces which are extremely large, some of the largest coins that have ever been issued in the area, again with typical Islamic designs but greatly enlarged. The designs give the normal declaration of the Islamic faith: there is no God but God and Muhammad is his prophet. Sorry, I lost my track. The first departure from traditional Islamic design in the area comes with the invasion of Central Asia by Turkic peoples, coming from Inner Asia, and they settled in the Uzbekistan area, what we normally call the Karakhanids in Britain, the Black Khans, who issued Islamic style coins as they became converted to Islam, but introducing strange designs on their coins, like the 4 rings on this copper coin from Bukhara. The 4 rings on both sides. These rings represent the traditional markings that the Turkic people used to brand their horses and to mark other possessions, what we call tamga in numismatic terms. Dynasties, like many other rulers in Asia at the time, were overthrown by the arrival of the Mongol hordes, and the Mongol hordes very quickly adopted Islam and began to issue coins in the Islamic tradition. This is a coin of Genghis Khan. It's a very small, insignificant object, but at the same time an object of great historical importance. Large gold pieces in the same Islamic tradition, quite spectacular pieces of metal. The Mongol coinages from Central Asia are very rich and contain many strange pieces. This piece comes from Bukhara, issued in the Mongol period, and as everyone knows, the Mongols had possessions in China as well, and this coin, although issued in Bukhara, has a Chinese character written on it, presumably by a Mongol official who'd brought Chinese practices with him. It's the Chinese word meaning tax. The coinage has a very clear purpose, to tax the peoples of Uzbekistan, to fill the coffers of the Mongol Khans. The historical figure to rule in Central Asia is Timur the Great. This copper coin was issued for him in Samarkand and has his typical 3-circle emblem on it. Most of his Samarkand coins are very small, like these pieces, but these larger copper pieces have the 3 circles very clearly. The emblem of Timur continued to be used by his descendants, and this is a coin of Timur's grandson, Ulugh-Beg, the renowned astronomer. It's an issue from Afghanistan. Unfortunately, we don't yet have any examples from Uzbekistan in the collection. We keep hoping. A copper coin from Samarkand, issued by Timur, with the 3-circle design, which is his personal badge. Re-established independence for Central Asia and extended its area of rule throughout the Central Asian Republic. So we have coins from Astrabad in Turkmenistan, from Afghanistan. Here is a coin from Bukhara, another coin from Turkmenistan from the mint of Merv. And also they penetrated into Iran, but their main centre was Uzbekistan, with issues from Bukhara and Samarkand. First coins of Babur, the Central Asian adventurer who eventually conquered northern India, start off as Shaibanid coins with little stamps added to them, like the stamp on this coin from Bukhara. And when his successors ruled in India, they took the designs of Shaibanid coins with them and issued rupees with very similar inscriptions. It's a very rich coinage of many gold pieces, issued by the Khans of Kokand, the Khans of Khiva, and the Emirs of Bukhara. And we have a particularly fine group of such material in the collection. They range from the beginnings of the local kingdoms right down to the Soviet period, down to the Russian period. And this group are Khans of Kokand, ruling in the Fergana region. Many of them have the mint name Fergana on them. These are the coins of the Khans of Khiva, Khwarezm, and finishing up in the tray with a coin issued by the Khwarezm Soviet Republic in the Islamic style. And in the last tray, this is just one of our trays of Bukhara Amir's coins, the gold tillers with extremely beautiful calligraphy on them, and some of the nicest of the later Islamic coins in terms of design, and then the small tengi, the standard silver coin in circulation throughout Central Asia. The same sort of coins also being issued in Chinese Turkestan at the same time as well. Most of the inscriptions on these are in Persian, because that's the tradition of coinage, but in Chinese Turkestan you also get Uyghur inscriptions appearing on the coins. There are a few coins where you have Chinese, Uyghur and Arabic on the same coin, which is quite a remarkable thing. It's the history of Uzbekistan right down to the present day, and we have, as well as coins, we also have paper money, and I've just pulled out two examples to show you, which are of great beauty and also of historic importance. This is a 1,000 tengi note from the end of the Bukhara Emirate. It's printed in 6 different colours, and I think a very beautiful design. Although it's paper money, which is a Western idea, it's very much a Central Asian design for the note. One small concession to the modern world is the denomination repeated in Russian at the bottom of the note, and the same sort of design on the back. Very beautiful thing. Not quite so beautiful, but of probably greater historic importance is this cloth note from the Khwarezm Soviet, issued in 1920, just after the arrival of the Soviet system in Central Asia. Khwarezm established itself as an independent Soviet republic and issued its own currency. The making of notes on cloth instead of paper is quite an unusual thing. There are very few examples of it, and this 1,000 ruble note is one of the few examples we have in the collection. For me, there is this sort of eloquent statement of Central Asian socialism, the crescent moon for Islam, and the sickle and spade, an individual interpretation of the sickle and hammer emblem, with millet plants growing, being ready for cutting by the sickle. It seems to be a much more poetic symbol than the hammer and sickle. Museum, we're very proud of the collection that we've built of Central Asian money, particularly the pieces that illustrate the rich numismatic history of Uzbekistan. We're very proud of it because we are a museum that loves the public and is open to everybody who wishes to come. And we see ourselves, although we call ourselves the British Museum, we see ourselves as an international museum, and people come from all over the world, and people have already come from Uzbekistan, and we hope more will come to see our rich collections, and we hope that we will be able to educate the world about the importance of Central Asian culture and its role in the world. We have on display here a 5 some note from Uzbekistan. It's part of our display on the history of money, and we show it here to show how the new republics coming out of the former Soviet Union have established their own identity and issued their own new forms of money. So the 5 some note with its Islamic design in emphasizing the Islamic heritage of Uzbekistan. And it fits into a display about the way money has become a global phenomenon. Money has spread throughout the world, and every country in the world issuing its own form of currency.
All right. This is a silver bowl with a Khwarezmian inscription, and it has a date which has been equated to the date of our era of 700 AD. It shows a deity with 4 arms. However, Boris Marshak has said that this is a local deity of Khwarezm, not a Hindu deity. The type of work that we see here, where the deity is in relief, is related to silver of the Sasanian dynasty of Iran and Central Asia. And you can see that it also relates to some of the wall paintings at Sogdian sites in central Uzbekistan. This is a very important piece in the British Museum's collection, this bowl with the Khwarezmian inscription. We do not have any others like this, and as a result we have it on permanent exhibition in our Islamic gallery as one example, one of our examples of early, of work that comes from the early Islamic period. And also it shows a kind of transition, I suppose, in Central Asia at that time. Really, it's still very much tied to the local beliefs and local styles at that time, 700 AD. Holding a bowl from the British Museum's collection that has a Khwarezmian inscription and a date that is the equivalent of 700 AD. The inscription runs around the rim of the bowl. Now in the center of the bowl we see a 4-armed deity which is seated on a kind of lion figure. According to Boris Marshak, this is a local deity of Khwarezm, not necessarily a Hindu deity, though of course 4-armed deities are typical of Hinduism and of Buddhism. This is a very important piece in our collection. We have no other objects from the Islamic period, from the 7th century on, that have Khwarezmian inscriptions. And so it's very rare in our collection, and therefore we keep it on permanent exhibition in our Islamic gallery.
What should we do is, these are, who has given various types.
Now, the British Museum has a collection of Samanid pottery, and traditionally, most of it has been assigned to Nishapur in Khorasan in Iran. However, I'm holding one of a group of objects that we think relate closely to the finds from Afrasiab, so Samarkand, in the Samanid period. This one is inscribed in Arabic across the center with the word baraka. And baraka laka, probably to you, blessings on you. You can see that it has reddish ground, and then around the rim and the inscription, the kind of dark brown color comes from manganese glazes. And this whole color combination and use of the white dots to outline the letter forms and the rim is something that we find often in Afrasiab wares. The confusion has been alleviated a bit in Europe and the West about what is from Afrasiab and what is from Nishapur by a wonderful exhibition that came a few years ago to Paris called Samarkand, and in that there were many examples of Afrasiab wares from the museum, the Afrasiab Museum in Samarkand. So that's why we have more confidence when we talk about pieces like this being from Uzbekistan rather than from Khorasan. Quickly, we think from the 10th century. And this is an interesting little piece. This bowl shows a ewer used for pouring water, most likely. Here again, we have these little white dots on a dark brown manganese ground. And what the potter did to make the piece look like this was he had reddish earthenware clay, and then he covered it, he painted it, glazed it, with something called slip, which is a dilute of clay, in this case red slip, and then he decorated it with his design with various oxides that came out in this color. And he covered the whole composition with a clear lead glaze. That's the technique of this. It's interesting because often we see pictures of or depictions of ewers pouring vessels on bowls, and we think that that has to do with the custom of pouring water over one's hands to wash one's hands before eating. And that's therefore the kind of meaning of this image on this piece.
But this is excellent.
Here's another piece that we think could come from Afrasiab. Now, this group of ceramics all came to the museum in the 1940s and 50s, and they were sold to the museum in some cases, or in other cases they were gifts of collectors to the museum. I'm not actually certain how they came. I think they may have come out of Uzbekistan earlier than that, or during the war even, and then gone to Iran. And the people who really were actively trading in this material were from Iran for the most part in this century. This bowl I'm showing here, unlike the other ones, has an abstract design, no writing, no recognizable object in it, but it too is just as typical of the wares that came from Afrasiab, with these white dots on a black or really dark brown ground, which had been painted over the reddish earthenware body. These were all excavated, so most of them were broken and then repaired. And sometimes they have holes in them from those missing pieces. But they are interesting anyway to us because they're so old. They're 1,000 years old, and show the sophistication and variety of pottery making at the centers such as Samarkand at that time. I think for modern Uzbeks, this probably is the most important piece that we have, because this jade cup has the name and titles of Ulugh Beg. Now, as you know from the wonderful jade cenotaph or coffin of Timur in the Guriamir, jade was very much treasured by the Timurid emperors. And there's much discussion in my department, because I am an Islamicist in a department that has Chinese specialists and other specialists as well. There is much discussion of whether this was actually made in China and acquired by Ulugh Beg, or whether it was made in Uzbekistan, in Samarkand, by Uzbek craftsmen for Ulugh Beg. I can't answer that question, and I think that this is a piece that will require further research. But I would like to say that this shape of cup, this oval shape, is something that was then, after the Timurids, was adopted by the Mughals of India, and it would be my suspicion that this was actually made for Ulugh Beg in Uzbekistan, because the shape is more typical of that region than it is of China. As you can see, the handle is in the form of a cat, probably a lion. And he grasps it with his paws and with his mouth, his teeth, at the rim, and then his body bends out and his legs attach again on the underside of the piece. There are many vessels we know of also that are jade with dragon-shaped handles. But this one is particularly plastic, actually, and very beautiful. And by plastic, I mean that it's very sort of sculptural and not stiff. On the end, opposite the lion, there is a repair in silver, and this has a Turkish inscription on it. So at some point, this piece must have traveled to the Ottoman regions, where it was repaired and inscribed. It's been in the British Museum since 1959, and was a gift or acquired with money from one of our major benefactors, who was a great collector of jades himself. I think that the tradition of appreciation and working of jade and collecting of jade really began in earnest with the Timurid rulers, and then continued, as I say, not only in Mughal India, but also in Safavid Iran and in Ottoman Turkey, in the Ottoman world. So they were the people who began this. And I think that this is a very fine example, and again, one that's important for the history of Timurids, Timurid art, and we're very proud that we have it in our collection. Oh. Group of tiles that are from the Timurid period, and some of them come from Samarkand. This one, which starts out saying Ay Muharram, probably comes from one of the buildings at the Shahizinde complex. As you can see, it's been glazed in an underglaze technique, whereas these small pieces that come from the Bibi Khanam are mosaic faience, so that each different color has been cut out and fitted into the other one. That's one of the great virtues of the buildings that Timur built in Uzbekistan, that his workmen combined all these different techniques of pottery making, and that's why you get such an incredibly rich tapestry at a place such as the Aksaray or at Bibi Khanam or in the Gure Amir. And it was, of course, a great proving ground for potters. Timur himself had brought many of these craftsmen from other places that he'd conquered, brought them to Samarkand and to Shahrisabz to do the building and decorating of his grand structures. And we find, therefore, a whole range, a very beautiful range of technology, really, and technique, and color and design in those buildings. The tiles that we see here, border tiles, are from a whole group in the British Museum. And what's interesting about those is that they probably came from the Bibi Khanam, and they were in the whole group that we have. There's a great range in quality, which makes us think that some of them were made to replace ones that had fallen or broken or something had gone wrong. And that's why you get this variation of quality in them. Even in the connecting borders, these white borders, you find different types of borders within the group, some more carefully done than others. When the Timurid Empire fell and was divided between the Uzbeks and the Safavids, a new school of painting was born at Bukhara. It's probable that the founder of this, founding artist of this school was someone named Sheikh Zadeh, who had worked for the Safavids but had remained in Herat, and then chose to go to Bukhara to work with the Uzbeks rather than going to Tabriz. The tradition of painting, the style of painting that had prevailed at Herat under Behzad was adopted in Bukhara. And so we see in a painting like this, which is an illustration from the Divan of Amir Khosrow Dehlavi, I mean the Hamza of Amir Khosrow Dehlavi, that the shape of the figures, the scale of the figures, and their appearance is based on the types of figures we see in paintings by Behzad of the end of the 15th century. This painting of a man and a woman would have been done around 1540 at Bukhara, and we find paintings like this one in books of poetry. Sometimes the pictures are small and on the same page as the poetry, but often they are facing a page of poetry or facing another similar picture of lovers or picnickers or whatever. And it's a much simpler type of painting than illustrations for manuscripts, for narratives, for stories. The figural type is still very much derived from the painting of Bezodd. And so we see that the figures have long waists and shortish legs and very round faces. I am Dr. Sheila Kambi. I'm curator of Islamic art and antiquities in
Is Sarah Posey, and I'm the curator in the Department of Ethnography with responsibility for our collections from Central Asia. We've been particularly collecting Uzbek material in the last few years, partly because more material has been available following independence, but also to tie in with the major exhibition that I curated at the British Museum on Kyrgyz tent felts, the large felts which were traditionally made for the floors of nomad tents. And I was keen to collect examples of tent-related textiles to give visitors to the exhibition a sense of nomadic traditions across the region, not just from Kyrgyzstan. So we've been developing our textile holdings. They're not very large, but we're very fortunate to acquire the pieces we have. And we have a very fine coat that was actually given by the President of Uzbekistan to the Queen in 1993, and the Queen has very kindly loaned that coat to us to hold for her and to be able to display and show to visitors. We're going to go through quite soon to the area where the textiles are held, and these textiles are actually being prepared for a major new research and storage facility which we're developing in something called the British Museum Study Centre, which is being prepared just a few metres away from the main British Museum in Bloomsbury. This textile centre will bring together the 18,000 textiles which are held across the British Museum, so that's 7 different departments that have textile holdings. In fact, 16,500 of those textiles actually come from my department, the Department of Ethnography, and we're currently involved in a process of examining each of those textiles to assess its storage needs, whether the textile needs to be rolled or laid flat or padded in some way, so that when we move to the new centre, these textiles will have the best possible storage. What's very exciting for us about the new textile centre is that the textile holdings not only will be in improved storage, but will be able to offer vastly improved access for visitors, whether they are individuals, scholars, groups, school children, whoever, will have much greater access to both the stored collections and also items on display. The vast majority of the Uzbek textiles that we have in the department date from the 20th century, and most were acquired since independence. The 2 coats that you see here date from about the 1920s and came to us from a London dealer who has travelled in the region.
I'm Dominique Collomb. I'm an assistant keeper, a curator in the Department of Western Asiatic Antiquities in the British Museum, and my speciality is ancient seals, and I have also studied the art of the whole of the ancient Near East. And I'm here to talk to you about the Oxus treasure, which was found in about 1880 by a Captain Burton, who rescued, apparently, according to the story, rescued some merchants who had been attacked by robbers on the northwest frontier, and they were carrying a treasure which they said had been found somewhere on the river Oxus, on the banks of the Oxus, or in the bed of the stream which had dried up. It's not quite clear exactly where, probably in present-day Tajikistan, but it's not at all certain. And certainly the objects came from all over the Achaemenid Empire and date from the 6th and 5th centuries BC. And they are, a lot of them are votive objects. The objects in this case here are probably plaques which were dedicated in a temple by travelers, merchants, high dignitaries. And here they're all of gold, and obviously some people had a lot of money to make big plaques, dedicate big plaques, but no artistic sense. This one, for instance, looks as if it was drawn by a child, but a plaque like the one over there, this one there, is a particularly beautiful example of a Achaemenid or a Mede in nomadic dress, a rider's dress, holding a baton, which was a ritual object. And he's wearing the costume of a rider. And the type of sword he's wearing, they found the same sort of sword in the Oxus treasure, which is in another case. Altogether, there were about 170 objects found in the Oxus treasure, and they are varying dates, but, and obviously horses were important because people were riding through Central Asia on their way to and from places, and so there are quite a lot of horse appliques and votive plaques, and there's a camel, unfortunately, a fragmentary. There are conflicting theories as to why some of the objects have been cut up and broken down. It's maybe that this was done by the people who robbed the treasure and they were dividing it up. Or it may have been that people dedicated part of an object to the temple. And the treasure was mixed. There, alongside the votive plaques, there were also a lot of objects which probably came from Central Asia and have animal-style affinities. They look a little bit Scythian, some of them. Particularly this beautiful pin here, which shows a monster with a lion's head, ibex horns, the ears of a mule, wings, and it's a particularly beautiful object. It was probably a hairpin, and it shows very much the animal style of Central Asia. Note the tail as well, which is completely different. It ends in a sort of floral motif. The bracelets are also in a very varied animal style, and there's a very beautiful animal style ring there with a curled animal, and a bird's head that's very much stylized. Then there are plaques which were probably sewn onto harness or decorated objects of some sort. In the merchant's possession when they were rescued from the thieves, but whether they were part of the Oxus treasure or not is not certain. They are certainly later in date. Some of them are contemporary. The earliest are the ones on the left here, which are Achaemenid date, so mostly 5th to 4th century. And then there are coins from various parts of the Hellenistic Empire, They go back to about 350 BC and go on to about 265 BC. So they're later than most of the Oxus treasure, but they may have belonged to another hoard found in the vicinity, or they may have been dedicated at a later date. The coins go all the way to Greece. From Greece to Bactria, they're found right across. They come from Babylon, they come from Sidon in the Lebanon, they come from Tarsus in southern Turkey, they come from Lydia and Caria in western Turkey. So they were brought from all over the Hellenistic and Achaemenid Empire. You see here is one we saw on one of the votive plaques. It's also found on the Persepolis relief. It's a typical Achaemenid type of scabbard, and it is decorated with a lion hunt, which owes something to Assyria, and yet the motifs down the sides are rather Scythian, stylized birds' heads. And it's a particularly fine example. As you can see, it was cut up, and probably at the time when it was supposedly stolen and being cut up by thieves before the merchants who were carrying it were rescued by Captain Burton. There are also a range of rather beautiful rings and seal stones, my particular passion, including a very interesting Achaemenid cylinder seal. The seal is on the left, and the modern impression of it, rolled out, is on the right, and you can see Achaemenid figures fighting with nomads, people in nomadic dress, and some of them are falling over and being stabbed, and others are lying dead on the ground. Jewelry, necklaces, earrings, and tassels of gold, and beads of gold, and little discs which were probably attached to garments. And people presumably took them off their garments and dedicated them in the temple. Rescued the merchants in the northwest frontier. He was allowed to buy from one of the merchants one of these beautiful bracelets, and he donated it to the Victoria and Albert Museum, who have loaned it to the British Museum to accompany the pair, which we have, the other half of the pair. These gold objects show typical Achaemenid monsters with ibex horns, eagles' heads, lions' paws, birds' feet, and birds' wings. And they were inlaid, presumably, with semi-precious stones, perhaps turquoise, carnelian, lapis lazuli, but these are now missing. But they are particularly beautiful objects, and they must have been worn by a very important dignitary.
Yes, you can.
Here are some various items of jewelry, rather simpler than the two armlets that we saw. Then coils of that went round the arm or wrist of the wearer, and some of them have been cut up, again perhaps by the thieves who are supposed to have stolen the treasure. They're cut into pieces. There are three here at the top which are made of silver and have gold heads, but all the others are made of gold, and they generally end in animal or bird heads. One has traces of turquoise inlay survive, but a lot of them must have been inlaid originally. The inlay has either fallen out or been stolen. Objects are, in this case, there's a handle of a vase which is decorated with a silver ibex inlaid with gold. There's a little silver bird which was attached to some object, a very fine lion's head with mule's ears, part of a demon figure, probably a little amulet as it has a loop for suspension. Typical Achaemenid-shaped vessels with decoration. One is silver, one is gold, and we're looking at the bottom of the dishes. They were used for drinking, and they would have been held in the hand by the person drinking. The little gold one is elaborately decorated with tear-shaped gadroons and little lions standing and waving their paws around. Above, there is a fish-shaped bottle. It has a hole in its mouth, and it's made of gold. Then there's a head, which is not Achaemenid in style. It is probably a local copy of a classical model. There's a little jug, which is very typically Achaemenid, and there's a gold bowl, you can see better from the other side. From the Oxus treasure, they are little gold figurines and models. The model chariots are particularly important because most of what we know about chariots is in the form of two-dimensional relief, largely from Persepolis, and here we have a model that shows us in 3 dimensions what the chariots looked like. And the one we are looking at now is particularly complete. It has nail-studded wheels. There's a passenger seated, robed passenger, and there's a charioteer and 4 horses. Complete model, the wheels are missing and one of the horses is missing. It was only drawn by 2 horses probably, but otherwise the cab is much the same shape with handles for people to hold on to when the chariot was being driven across rough terrain. Of 3 figures wearing one of them obviously riding a horse and wearing rider's dress, and the horse is missing. There was probably a model horse that he was fitted into, and he must have been holding something in probably the reins in his right hand, and in his left he seems to have been holding the balsam rods, which were ritual objects. The 2 other little figures are wearing more ceremonial robes, but a rather similar headdress, and they were possibly priests or dignitaries, high officials. They are wearing long-sleeved coats. In the long-sleeved coats, don't seem to have had their arms in the coats. The sleeves were hanging empty, and this is typical of Medes, and they are holding the balsam against their waists. You can see the ritual object, the balsam, held against their chests. Ritual animals which were attached perhaps to boxes. They may have been the lids of boxes, and they're little plates that were obviously screwed on, nailed onto an object. There's a little head and an animal's head as well, all made of gold. Hemispherical gold bowl, a gold drinking cup, and a small gold jug. All very indicative of the wealth of objects from the Oxus treasure, because they are very heavy, thick gold. Note the lion's head on the handle of the jug.
Yes,
These three figures show a variety of styles. One of them is wearing a Achaemenid dress with pleats, diagonal pleats going from a central ribbed area, and he's made of silver and gilded, part gilded. The central figure is very much an indication of Hellenistic, of Greek influence, and he may have been holding objects in his hands, and he has a gold headdress, but he is made of silver. He's very heavy to hold, and he's shown naked, which is most unusual in the Near East. This would indicate that definitely a Greek influence. And finally, there's a little figure of a man in a tunic, and he's holding an object that looks a bit like a golf stick, but we don't know. He was probably part of a group, and we don't know exactly what he was doing. It may have been a rope attached to something, or a stick used for some purpose, but we don't know what. And again, a rather Greek influence to that figure. Acquired by merchants sometime before 1880, and they carried it with them to try to sell in India. When they were attacked, apparently, by robbers, and Captain Burton is supposed to have rescued them. There is some doubt about the exact sequence of events. Apparently, he single-handedly rescued the merchants and drove away the thieves who were busy cutting up the treasure, the division between them. There's quite a lot of doubt about that story. What is certain is that the merchants allowed Captain Burton to buy one of the bracelets and then sold the treasure in Rawalpindi. The treasure was then bought to a large extent by a man called Cunningham, who was in the area at the time, and he then sold a lot of it to one of the curators in the British Museum, Williston Franks, and the treasure therefore entered the British Museum. It comes from a whole range of places right across the empire. If we count the coins as part of the treasure, it goes right from Greece through to Bactria. If the coins are excluded, because they might well be later, then, well, they are later than the bulk of the treasure, then the objects date mostly from the 5th and 4th centuries BC and show the extent of the Achaemenid Empire, the range of influences from Greece, from Central Asia, and local Achaemenid court style and they also show the importance possibly of the local cult, perhaps of Anahita, who is known to have had a shrine somewhere in the area, and they probably were votive objects dedicated in a temple, perhaps Anahita's. The interest is that it shows just how eclectic the styles were. People were traveling, coming into contact with different cultures. Those of Iran were particularly important because the Achaemenid Empire was an Iranian empire, but the Iranian Empire was the foundation for the later Hellenistic Empire of Alexander the Great. And it's a period of tremendous connections on a wide scale.